Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and it is perfect timing right now to be diving into an unboxing for Wave 2 of Nemesis, and that's exactly what you're seeing in front of the camera at the moment. We've got the Untold Stories number 2, an art book, some cards here, the Xenomorph expansion, terrain expansion, and the stretch goals box at the bottom for Aftermath and Void Cedars. Now, if you haven't checked out the original unboxing of the Nemesis Core experience, I'm going to put a link to that in the top right hand corner of this video right now. You can go check that out first before you check out this unboxing if you haven't heard of Nemesis before and you want to know more about what the Core experience is going to bring. The other important note to make with the Core game is that that Core game is going to retail, whereas some of this Kickstarter content is up in the air as to what will actually be included in retail and what won't be. And again, it might be a demand thing, it might be just who actually decides what is going to move through the retail chains, but for now the Core experience has been confirmed at least. The other thing that's really exciting is the fact that I am doing a showcase of Nemesis on the channel for the Untold Stories, and it's already on the go. So if you want to check that out, I'll also have a link in the top right hand corner of this video to shoot you right to the setup video for that if you want to check that out. But without further ado, what we're going to do right now is take a look at these boxes, at least at the exterior of them. But first, before we do, we'll talk quickly about the Untold Stories 2 book without actually spoiling anything inside, the art book, and then this pack of smaller cards right here. So we'll start things off with the Untold Stories booklet number 2, and this deck of cards right here. Actually, it's not an overly large deck of cards. There looks to be about 10 or so in the pack. We'll take a look at these close up, but they tie directly into this campaign right here. So here's an up close view of that deck of cards that comes along with this Untold Stories booklet number 2. What's really cool is the fact there actually is a deck of cards that actually comes along with the booklet, whereas with the first one there wasn't any, so this is definitely new and different. This one here has things like starting with an event 15, it has a sunburn, that's an event 17, so again this is all going to call things that are going to go back to that booklet behind me here. So we're going to start by just showing you the artwork mainly on the cards, because we won't know what the events mean as we're not going through the booklet entirely, as I don't want to have spoilers during this video. I will show you a couple pages so you get a rough idea as to what it looks like, but I don't want to spoil the campaign in any way. But these cards are fairly spoiler free in that they trigger events of which we don't know what they actually are, or they just have us drawing additional cards, for instance. But the artwork is really, really cool. All of the Nemesis content, to be honest, is very thematic, tense, and it definitely pulls you in, draws you into the experience. So they've done a very good job on the past cards that I've looked at, and this set looks just as nice. So we get all the way to the very end. We even have one that's specific to locations. This is very interesting. So there must be some type of mission that involves different room locations here, because you've got this, the nest room, comms room, laboratory, and surgery on one side, and the opposite side you've got the exact same thing. So I'm not exactly sure what this is for just yet, but obviously has some major tie-in to that booklet behind me. So, without further ado, this is the Untold Stories book number 2. Again, I want to avoid spoiling a lot of content in this thing because it's going to be an adventure you're going to want to check out, but this booklet, very much like the original one, is going to have an overview for you, giving an idea of how this stuff adds on to the gameplay elements, how to use this add-on, how to set things up. You can even see right in the setup automatically here, the storyline draft has these cards we just took a look at, and they call them comic event cards. So they're referred to right off the get-go to let you know exactly how they're used. It even lets you know this awaiting events card here is what that one I was wondering about is showing you, and there's result boxes here, how other tokens in the game are used, all that good information. And then essentially you move into literally a comic book narrative to set up your very first adventure. So this is probably as much as I will actually show, because again, I don't want to spoil anything further. The very beginning here doesn't have too much, but it gives you an idea of the artwork and the layout of how the story unfolds. But if you want to find out more, you can check my showcase out and you'll actually see some of this stuff up close and personal, at least with the first mission. The next item from wave number 2 is this Nemesis Art Book. and this art book really is going to take some of those smaller card graphics and art design that is very easy to see, but then blow them up so you can even enjoy them in a larger scale. So I'll show you a bunch of this, as there's nothing spoiler in here. This is just straight up pictures from the artwork within the game. I do apologize for any glare that it might hit. I'll try my best to avoid that. But you'll see some of the really cool artwork, again, just blown up to a size where you can really enjoy it. So very, very nice all the way around. I'll just flip through a number of pages here so you can get a rough idea of how things look. And I believe there's probably about 50 pages or so of art in this booklet. All of it's very, very cool looking. Some of them I'm recognizing right off the hop. I know which cards they actually relate back to. But it's beautiful stuff for sure. And of course there's even some art from the new characters as well in this, plus the original ones too. So that's also nice to see. That means stuff coming from Wave 2. Wow, that's really cool. And again, some of this artwork I might not have seen because it might be coming with this Wave 2 stuff. So this is a really cool, wow, that is super nice. Not exactly the type of situation you want to have yourself involved with, but they definitely did a great job with this stuff. Looks phenomenal. And literally feels like you're actually looking at a movie, like you're looking at kind of stills from a movie. It's really cool. So that's about it. That is essentially the entire art book. So that's just a nice to have item for Nemesis. The next item for us to take a look at is Nemesis, the Terrain expansion. So this is absolutely, in my opinion, a must-have because it really does take some of the elements of the gameplay that are in token or standee form and kind of elevates them and immerses you a little bit more. For instance, the door tokens for Nemesis are a little small. They're standees and they look a little silly in relation to the intruders and their huge size, and even just the regular character human miniatures are almost larger than the doors themselves, if not larger. So what happens here with the terrain expansion is it starts to scale things, plus you obviously get a miniature to represent the door, so the quality of the actual rooms and the doors coming down and closing and opening looks that much cooler on the table. So we're going to go ahead and open this up inside. I will warn you in advance, there is about 4 or 5 missing from the box because I've pulled them out and started using them in the showcase that I'm currently doing, so you might see some empty slots. So this is what the terrain expansion looks like inside the box. You can see there's a couple slots here where I've already taken out doors. As I mentioned, you go ahead and just pick the entire thing up like so. We can move the rest up, and we've got ourselves 2 doors going all the way along here, and 5 of them are missing because I've stolen them out, as I mentioned. We've got 4 escape pods along the far right hand side, which is really cool because now we have a miniature to represent those instead of an actual token, which is really cool. So I will actually show you guys this up close. So again, there's a nice cover here to keep them protected. The doors have 2 different sculpts. So this particular sculpt actually has the claw marks ripping straight through the door itself. And again, these are sun drops, so they have a little bit of shading going on to them as well. They're not just a typical standard miniature plastic, and that's about it. So this one here has a nice little hole puncture in the door. Looks like somebody tried to bust through or a blast through the door. Some cracks and stuff like that, and then the opposite side looks a little different, so very cool. And again, those are the 2 different sculpts for the doors. We've got the escape pods over here. And of course, they've actually gone ahead and made some indented areas for the miniatures to sit inside of. Now, I have heard people say that it is tough to get your miniature into these slots, I think, with the colored bases on them. So what I would recommend is if they actually fit, which I do believe they do without the bases, the recommendation is to actually paint, instead of using the colored bases on your miniatures, paint around the edge of the miniature's base and just paint it red for a colored red ring, for instance. And then you'd be able to just slot it in here with no problem at all. That'd be kind of the way to get around that one. So that's essentially the top tray and what's involved there. Now we're going to move into the second tray below. So here's an up-close shot of some of the dead characters represented in miniature form here. You'll notice there's 5 different sculpts. They're not even the same. So there's 5 different ways you can kind of show a particular character not really making it through. So there's some really cool ones where someone's like seated and has been taken out. Other ones where they're laying up against some boxes and some other things like that. The detail on them is actually quite nice. I'm really impressed with what I was seeing detail-wise. And again, remember, the sun drop is on these things, so that kind of adds an additional element to the shading of things, but I really like that. Especially makes the grates kind of show up on the bottom of the bases. And again, that's also a nice touch that they didn't just have generic bases. Some of them are just individuals that are just curled up and haven't really had the best go. And another one here looks like a soldier that's just been completely taken down. So pretty cool. Now this next one, I'm actually unsure of completely. My guess is that it has something to do with the Void Seeders. I'm not 100% sure, but this is a miniature that I'm not familiar with, would replace anything from the base game of Nemesis. I think this is specific to one of the expansions that are coming inside of this Wave 2. So that is a look at all of the miniatures inside the Terrain expansion. And now we're getting into some seriously exciting stuff. This is the Carnal Morph expansion. This is an absolutely nasty set of individuals you can go up against inside the game of Nemesis. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the back side of the box because there is some artwork there, and then we're going to dive inside this one. Take a look at these miniatures up close. This is what the back of the box looks like. There's nothing to read here, but I did want to show the actual artwork, and I was correct when I was going through the art book and I saw that heat level critical art that actually does pertain here to one of the expansions, as I mentioned. So when you open up this box, you're going to be greeted by a manual, a very aggressive looking Carnal Morph, which is going to be staring you in the face, one of many that you'll probably be dealing with inside this game. So I'll go ahead and flip this open so you can see roughly an idea as to the rules involved with this. We got game elements over here, components that are involved, the setup here, which actually goes through 20 steps to set this up. Again, remember, when you're playing this version versus the base game of Nemesis, this is going to go ahead and it's going to add essentially a whole new way to play the exact same game. So it's really important to note that you're setting the game up in a different fashion than you would with the normal base game. And that's kind of the fun with playing with an additional expansion. It completely changes up the game. So you've got things like mutations in here, character mutation cards, mutation actions, mutation markers, contamination cards, which come over from the original game. Carnal Morph rules here for different symbols, and again, they are going to be handled completely different, meaning that they're a whole different set and have their own pluses and minuses of pain that they'll throw at you. Intruder attack here, we got all kinds of craziness, how the injuries and death pan out, which looks to be different. Adaptions. So it looks like the Carnal Morph board is again going to be different than the Intruder board and is also going to be handled differently. There seems to be different stages here of the particular enemies, and that looks pretty nasty. It says each new time a Carnal Morph type appears on the board, take the corresponding Carnal Morph miniature from the Carnal Morph board and reveal the appropriate adaptation cards. So essentially, it's adapting to the environment, or it's adapting to the situation as it goes along, which is pretty wild. So that's totally different than the way the original base game works. So that's kind of cool to see, just kind of further proof that it's a very different experience. Gameplay rules here, we've got encounters, the event phase laid out, and over here we got some additional gameplay rules for most of the tokens that we're familiar with, but again, different usages. That's it. So again, if you know how to play the base game of Nemesis, moving into this one's not going to be earth-shattering. You'll get through a few pages here. It's only about a half page of a regular size sheet of paper, so it's not so bad in terms of what you have to read. So the next thing you're going to run into is that Carnal Morph board I was talking about, as well as tokens. So you can see here we got some warning tokens with different numerical values on them. We've also got all kinds of other tokens. These ones actually add to ones that came inside of the base box. The Carnal Morph board is completely new, as I mentioned. You got eggs in the nest here, Butcher Intruder egg, the Flesh Beast Intruder carcass, and the Sham Blur character corpse. All those things sound terrible and are likely things you're going to have to deal with when playing here. There's the different symbols all the way down. And next up, we move into the box of miniatures. And this, again, is really cool in the fact that they even shaded the sun drop of this expansion differently than the Nemesis core box. So if you went with the sun drop each of the different expansions and each of the different ways you can play this game have their own shading of color. So again, it's just kind of, you know, it's a nice touch, instead of just everything being blue like the core Sundrop was, this is now red. And then you've got the Void Cedars, which will be a completely different color that you'll see later on. So these miniatures that I have in my hand right now are called Metagorger miniatures, and they are the lowest on the totem pole in terms of the pecking order for these Carnomorphs, which are likely still probably just as much fun to deal with when you're playing through this particular expansion. But I wanted to show you these up close. They have some great detail. Again, the bases look fantastic. The Sundrop is a nice touch. Again, I actually am kind of tempted to myself just go through and do some touch highlighting on some of these to really bring them out even further. I've actually seen on some of the forums where people have taken the Sundrop and then taken it to the next level by adding some highlights and some additional touches to really draw it out. But honestly, this is tabletop ready as it is. They look really good. So one thing that I forgot to mention in the last clip there was about the Metagorgers and the fact that they have 4 of one sculpt and 4 of the other sculpt, and you saw 2 of each of the sculpts in that last clip. This individual right here is called the Sham Blur, and my guess is that this thing moves really slow, but could be wrong. Maybe he shambles along at a really quick pace, but either way, this basically looks like a human that's had a really bad day. His spine is all out in the open, rib cage is ripped open, like just looks extremely aggressive, but it's a really cool, very detailed miniature, very dynamic pose for sure. If you wanted to go ahead and add highlights to this, it'd be pretty wild. You could definitely add a little extra, but actually, as I mentioned before, the Sundrop does a really good job of shadowing things in and giving this thing life, but it does not look like an individual that's too happy to be in this state, and you probably don't want to run into this on the ship. So for the Shamblers in the last clip, there's 8 of them in the box, and they all have the exact same pose. This next creature I'd like to introduce you to, there's 3 of them in the box, and this is called the Flesh Beast, and it's kind of a fitting name seeing as this thing would absolutely look like it's needing of a lot of flesh. There's so much openness to this creature. It looks like all the flesh has actually been removed everywhere, but there's a lot of detail here, like especially if you spin around to the backside here, you can see all the nooks and crannies. So again, if this was not Sundropped, you could go to town on actually painting this thing through. But again, I could go through here and highlight some things as I want to, but it's already got enough here with the Sundrop to pop some things out for me, and I'm quite happy with it as it is. It's a very creepy looking miniature all the way around. The last miniature in the box is this one right here. Pretty awesome. Crazy bones just jutting out of this thing all over the place. This is called the Butcher. And yeah, this thing has 2 heads coming out of the top of it. Definitely something you're going to be throwing all kinds of, well, you're probably going to want the flamethrower in this situation if you're having to deal with this guy. But very, very aggressive looking. And there is, as I mentioned, only one of these in the box. So this is the big bad for the Carnomorphs. So now we're going to go through some of the mini cards that come inside this expansion. These are the Carnomorph adaptation cards, and there's a few of these, about 8 of them or so. So we got here Tentacle, and I'm not going to read each one of these. You can feel free to go ahead and read them as you want. Regenerative Tissue, Changeling, Quickening, Fire Resistant, Genetic Malfunction, all the different abilities on there as well. If you want to pause the screen in order to read them, feel free. I'll go back through them again for those of you that are interested. And that covers the mini cards. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at the standard size cards that come in this expansion. We got the Carnomorph attack cards, a whole bunch of them. They'll be at the very bottom once I flip this over. Character mutations will be somewhat in the middle. Those are cool to see because that's different for this one. And events all the way to, ooh, the Carnomorph help card. That's going to be handy. So we flip that Carnomorph help card over. We got ourselves the Intruder Bag Development, so it's showing us basically how this works out now with the tokens that are in the game. There's 5 of them for 5 different players that can play. And we get into the cards now. So again, I'm going to go through these at a relatively quick pace, but feel free to pause the screen if you really want to see the abilities down below here. I'm focusing on the artwork as well, making sure that things are in focus for you guys so you can actually see the card along with the text, because that's fairly important here with the unboxing. But again, the artwork all the way around is pretty awesome. Cannot wait to try this out. Again, it's cool that I can play this game in a totally different way than what's even in the core experience. And this one has, oh, now we're getting into the, so at this point right now, we're getting into the character mutation stage. So this is where we're going to see some cards that are definitely different from what is in the core game in terms of mechanics. So you got infected up here and not infected down below. Pretty awesome. And then we're getting into the actual Xenomorph attack cards. And this is going to be interesting, or very interesting to see, is 2 different levels there for the... wow, and some movement mixed in there too. That's some serious high... well, some high values there. Hopefully you can see the bottom as well. An 8 even. Aggressive artwork. I love that. That looks really cool. They're almost falling into my hand. I got so many. These look absolutely great. All right, so that is the entire pack of standard cards, as well as what you just saw, the mini cards for the Xenomorphs. We have the Nemesis Stretch Goal Box, Aftermath, and Void Seeders. Let's go ahead and flip this thing over, take a look at the back of the box. And here's an idea of what the back of the box looks like. So when you open up the box, the first thing you'll be greeted with is the Nemesis Aftermath Expansion Manual. So let's go ahead through a couple of the pages here so you can get an idea of what you're looking at with this one. So again, we've got the game elements involved here. And then if we move over to this side, we got the which game mode should I choose? Because yes, you can play this game in multiple different modes, as you guys know. And now even more so with this Kickstarter content, new traits and characters mentioned here, how this works, the CEO, the android, these are different player characters that you can use. Moving right along here, we've got the psychologist, the bounty hunter, the convict. These are all different peoples that are new to the game from the core, like in addition to the core box. Other Aftermath components, you've got alert cards here for alert stages, activation actions, new rooms, a crafting room, a server room, an alarm room, a turret room. We have actual turrets now. So again, the actual Kickstarter stretch goals are adding into that core experience now and making even just the regular mode of play different, which is pretty cool. And we've got the Aftermath exploration tokens here. We'll continue on. Lots of stuff to go. Oh yes, and importantly here, a new board called the Shuttle, which is also a new piece we'll see very soon. Epilogue mode. That's pretty awesome. So this one says, of course, before setting up the epilogue mode, you must play a full regular game of Nemesis. So this is basically something that obviously is going to occur after a game of Nemesis and kind of allows you to play after the fact and adds more to the experience afterwards. If you want to kind of finish off the game with something different. You got the research mission mode. Looks like a different way to play the game. Pretty cool. Something I'll have to dive into. I do remember that being mentioned during the Kickstarter, but kind of forgot about that one. And the completion of that exact research mission mode being laid out there. So that is essentially that book all done. And then we move into the expansion manual or game manual for the Void Seeders. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one. So flipping this open to the first page, we've got, similar to the other books, we got the game elements here. We've got the game setup page going through 1 all the way through 21 steps here in this case. Void Seeder features. This is going to be talking about things like, oh yes, now I remember the game introduction, the insanity system. This is what I remember from the Kickstarter. Now it's kind of coming back into my mind. But yeah, these Void Seeders are going to be messing with your sanity. And the character's got his sanity tokens or insanity tokens now. Panic cards. They have layers. This is craziness. This is a lot of different ways to play this same game with so many different facets. It's really cool. Void Seeders rules, specific rules for them, again with the iconography for the bag and stuff. The Void Seeder tokens as well. This is going to be an absolute blast to go through. Event phase rules, gameplay changes. So again, it's pretty compact in terms of what it does. If you know how to play the base game of Nemesis, I imagine you'll be able to come to terms with these new rules for whichever expansion, Carnivores, or if you choose to go with the Void Seeders. Either way, it's only a handful of pages to read and just some changes in terms of some of the major mechanics from the base game. Of course, there's some additional content added in, but that's what makes the game replayable, which is just fantastic. Now we get into the meat of this box. So we've got ourselves, what is this? These are the turrets. So these are the turrets in token form. Now I could be wrong, but I believe there might be miniature tokens for these turrets inside the box, or maybe I've already gone past them somehow, but I thought there was miniatures for these, but either way you've got them in punch-out form here. Then you're gonna have the characters. So we have the medic here, is a new character within the game here. So again, basic actions, crafting, things like that will remain the same. The miniature obviously changes, but everything else looks the same. Again, different tint of a color in terms of the player board for the medic. This board right here has a mix of players to play as well as some new rooms. So that's pretty cool. So we got ourselves the server room here. It says use an other computer. So you can kind of tap into the server and use a different computer in another room. We've got the turret room here. So again, this can allow you to control turrets from this room. You have the alarm room right here, which is to make noise. You can purposely make noise, which can help you because controlling noise in Nemesis is really important. So being able to actually place noise elsewhere sounds like a pretty cool idea. This is also really cool, guys. You'll notice that some of the miniatures in the new characters, like the CEO has like kind of an android with him basically, or a robot, and there's two of them on the actual base of the miniature itself as well, which is kind of a nice touch. You've got the android over here. Oh, I guess I shouldn't have called that our android if we actually have an android right here. That's more of just a robot. This is an android, and you've got an android there. Again, everything on the actual cards here, or I shouldn't say cards, but the player mats are the same, minus the picture of the character itself and the coloring. So that is that one. Next up, we've got more. So more characters. Never a bad thing to have more characters. Gives you more options, plus a whole bunch of tokens. So what do we got here? We've got the target all and different inactive, target intruders, or target everybody. And it's kind of like statuses, green, yellow, and red. Tokens here again to flush out, because I'm guessing with these expansions, you're going to need the additional tokens. A crafting room. That seems pretty cool. So you can craft items in there. You got the psychologist here, so that's what the psychologist looks like, and the miniature. The bounty hunter is on the opposite side, looking pretty good. I'm loving all these new characters. It's fantastic to have options. I love that. This is normal. I believe, if I remember correctly, during, I don't know if it was on the Nemesis page or through Awaken Realms somehow, someone mentioned, hey, these were empty. Are we missing something? I don't believe anything's missing here. I think that was purposely done. Now, I'm going to double check that outside of the video. Someone can confirm that with me, but I believe that this is normal. So there's no need to panic, I don't think. The convict here. That's a really cool one. I really like to use the convict. He seems really awesome looking. And then you've got on the, oh, look at that. He already wants to come out and start playing already. And then you got the void Cedar board. So you got, that's so cool. So again, every time you're talking a different expansion, whether it was the intruders, which was the base game, you got the Carnal with their own board, and now the void Cedar board as well. Eggs and nest there, intruder egg here, intruder carcass here, and character insanity level. There's the major component of the void Cedars. Destroyed layer, and destroyed layer. And a whole bunch of tokens on the bottom. So we got warning tokens all over the place and some insanity tokens for the characters. So that's pretty awesome. All right, so next up is the ship, or I shouldn't say the ship, the shuttle is a new board for this. Now, I have no idea how this enters the game at all. I don't know if this is something where, you know, this is like separate attached shuttle to the major main board. I'm assuming so. And you can go ahead and explore a number of other 2-level tiles, which is pretty cool because that would allow you to make use of those new tiles we've seen. So that might expand out the game. Who knows? I have to double check on when you can actually use this board, but that's essentially what it looks like. Good high quality board. Doesn't look like it's going to break apart anytime soon. Now, I would love to see a neoprene mat come out for Nemesis. I know that Awaken Realms has recently released a neoprene mat through their store for Lords of Hellas, so I'm assuming Nemesis is next. So you never know, it might happen. If it really does, that'd be awesome. I know there's individuals that have gone ahead and taken the files from Board Game Geek or Awaken Realms in order to create kind of third-party neoprene mats with stitching, and that's pretty cool. I might even go that route as well, but an official one would be even better, especially if it included the shuttle board in some way or capacity, plus had maybe some spots for some cards and other boards and things like that. But we're going to be leaving that to them to see whether that comes out in the future. So now we're at the bottom of the void Cedar box here. I'm going to take out this clear insert, get rid of these packs, and we're going to start taking a look at the miniatures. One thing that I'd like to quickly point out that I missed is that this actual sheet of tokens is a corrected layer and 1 turret exploration tokens replacement for 6 missing tokens from the other punch board that we saw earlier. So when I said that those 6 that were missing from the other punch board was normal, this is the reason why I thought it was normal, because I remember reading something where they provided it elsewhere, and this was exactly that. Except I said it was 6 turrets, it's actually 3 turrets and 3 what's called layers in the game. And we actually have 1 miniature for a layer as well, and it looks like this, which is pretty creepy looking, but lines up with what the picture on the bottom of that token did. Very good detail. You'll also notice the coloring is different, more of a purplish or violet hue to these ones. These lovely creatures are called Lurkers, and there's 6 of them inside the box. They have some really cool looking detail on them as well, and I really do like the fact they went with kind of the violet or purple shading on these ones. I think it's a good choice for the Void Cedars. Next, you're going to find 4 of these miniatures. They're called Whisperers. They have these tentacle-like legs kind of going down into the base, which looks very, very cool. So I'll just spin that around so you can see it from all angles. I really like the detail on these as well. Now, I talked about this specific miniature earlier on in the video, but I did mention at that time that there was only the 1. There's actually 3, and when I moved the Whisperers out of the box, there was actually more of these layers underneath of them. Here's a look at the 2 turrets that were underneath the Whisperers as well. So these look quite awesome. This next Void Cedar is a big one, and you can see here he's got his tentacles or his limbs all wrapped around all kinds of steel. It is a large scale miniature, looks very, very cool from all angles, so hopefully you can see the detail there. Very, very impressed with this one. And last but certainly not least is the Despoiler. This thing is massive. You'll also notice there's no base on this one, but the legs are orientated in a way that it sits perfectly flush and level on the playing field, which is pretty cool, but it has a lot going on here. So I'm just going to flip this around so you can see the back and the side angle of this thing. It's really cool. I really like the fact there's actually no base on this one. It just kind of gives it a much more freeing feeling as a miniature, not having to deal with the base and it covering up any artwork and things like that, but it's definitely a very aggressive one. In the box underneath of the last miniature I just showed, there is a dog, which is going to go along with one of the new characters. So the detail even on this tiny little dog is really awesome. Again, the sun drop helps to bring that detail out. So I'll hopefully hold it still enough that you guys are able to pick that out. Pretty impressed with this as well. Looks good from all angles. And here is a look at all of the heroes that come inside of this box. We've already gone through each of these one at a time. You'll notice one of them has a base ring around it. For the other heroes, if you want to use them, you'll have to remove the color bases from the base box and then put them on appropriately, or you could potentially try and find some extra bases that you have lying around to see whether or not you can get them to fit. But again, the detail on these ones are just as nice as the actual enemies themselves. You'll notice this one here has the nice double, so there's 2 actual miniatures going on in the same base, which is pretty cool. But overall, these things look fantastic. Next item inside the box is a sand timer. That's right. So you're going to be up against the pressure of time in some capacity. So it'll be cool to figure out exactly how that works inside the game. Now let's talk about the mini cards that come inside this expansion. We got some crafted items that we'll go through. We got some cards that are specific, of course, to the characters in the game. So the Convict, for instance. So let me see here. I might have to flip this over to the opposite side. We've also got the Insanity Track cards. That's cool. Void Cedar Weakness cards. Oof, this is going to be interesting. So let's flip this over. So the first ones we're looking at right now is going to be the Void Cedar Weakness cards. So we got solid bulkheads. And I won't go ahead and read through all the abilities on the bottom here. Again, you can pause if you'd like to read them. Then we come to a card that I'm definitely not familiar with. This is the Insanity Track. Very interesting indeed. So there's an actual full-on track going on here. Not sure how those are implemented yet, but I know it has everything to do with those Void Cedars. Now we're getting into the actual player cards themselves. So the robot here, CEO. this card here for the character itself, and then of course we're going to get some different cards to use with them. So these are starting cards essentially. Remember, you have like quests, for instance, for these particular characters. So again, these aren't going to mean too much, but I will show you the one side so you can kind of get an idea. This one here is for the android. You got the arm gun and the emergency energy cell and the deactivation module. For the psychologist, you've got an energy weapon pistol, you've got a drone, an emotion scanner. For the bounty hunter, you got a rifle, a 245. That's pretty awesome. There you go. There's the bounty hunter is the one with the dog. Cuffs for the convict, a pipe, and an augmented arm, as well as cuffs, key, combat drone, and virosuit. These might be just straight, are those ones straight up next to cards? Oh, right, because these are crafted items. So these crafted items are specific to just some extra ones, because I know in the original base game you had things like Molotovs and things like that, so they've added a few more things that you can build. Probably one per every type of crafting combination would be my guess. We'll have to see, though, how that's actually implemented. I could be wrong there. But the combat drone is one. You've got the envirosuit as another, and the laser pointer as the last. So that is going to cover all of the mini cards, but there's a whole bunch of standard size cards to go through. So here we go. We're going to start off with the very brand new trait cards. So every single character inside the game has their own trait card now. You can see it easily depicted by each of the pictures here. So that's very awesome. We're going to flip those over in a second. We got some new serious wounds to add in generically. We have some new event cards even for the base game with that base game backing here for the events. And then we get into specific, and there's actually quite a bit of them, and then we get into some specific cards based on alerts. Again, this is going to tie back into this particular box. And lastly, probably events specific around the Void Cedars themselves. So now that you've seen the backs of the cards, let's flip them over. We'll take a look at the front, and you guys can go ahead and pause the screen if you want to read any of these. We got computer system failure here, pod ejection, fuel explosion, fire, wave, wow, ship at failure, whispers, terror, fear, hunt, neurosis. So many cool cards. Escape control, disarming the bomb, decontamination procedure. These are, okay, these are the alerts category, or the alert type of cards now. These are definitely new. Actually, pretty much everything we're seeing here is new. I've never seen any of it. So it's very, very cool. Artwork looks like it carries over some of the stuff from before. Some new stuff. It looks so good. What are these? We are now into a different type of card. Oh yeah, so these are going to be some additional events. So that's kind of cool. Sparks, screeching, adaptability, infested supplies, maneuver. There's some new serious wounds. So melted, if your character has a slime marker each time you pass in the player phase, your character suffers a light wound. That's bad. 2 of those. And here we go with the traits. These are really interesting. So let's focus on these for a second. So this is a trait for the CEO. You start the game with a body serious wound. As long as your robot has energy markers, this wound is considered as dressed. Before the game starts, check the corporate objectives of each player. Cool. And the synthetic has a really, really large, this is the android actually, has a really large trait card to read through. The psychologist trait card. The bounty hunter's trait card. The convicts, that's probably the most straightforward of all of them. Just die already for the captain. Authorization for the pilot. Scientist. Scout. The soldier. And lastly, the mechanic. And that's going to wrap up that pack of cards. Next up, we're taking a close look at the action cards for all of the new characters, of which there's a whole bunch. So we're going to start off here with the CEO. And I'll just move through these at a relatively quick pace. Pause the screen at your leisure in order to read more about each of these cards. But this is the CEO deck of cards. Now we're moving into the Android. The artwork is so much to take a look at and just stare at. I just kind of want to stare at that and really just focus on it. Psychologist, that looks awesome as well. So good. Just so well done. They nailed it. Cannot wait to use these new characters. Bounty Hunter. Oh, there might be another card in there. There is. Sometimes I might miss the odd card here, as some of them might be together. They're brand new pack of cards, so very cool cards for the Bounty Hunter. This one also has one hiding behind it. Convict. Might be one under here. Nope, that's it. That is the completion of that deck of cards. The next deck of cards starts off with a lucrative offer card and then some personal requirement cards. And by a few, I mean quite a few personal requirement cards. Then it moves into panic cards, of which there's quite a few of those as well. And then we've got the Void Cedar attack cards with a back that's absolutely awesome looking. Very terrifying indeed. Bunch of those, and then we've got the epilogue mode card for help essentially on either side. We'll take a look at the other side in a second. I imagine, yep, Void Cedar's help card here as well in terms of the player phase and the event phase. And we've got 5 of those. All right, let's flip this thing over and take a look at the opposite side. So we got the help card for the intruder bag for the Void Cedars. Got 5 of those. We've got the help card for the intruder bag for the opposite. This one was for the epilogue. Pretty cool. Now we're actually going to see this side of the Void Cedars. Pretty aggressive. Brain eating. That's pretty awesome. Dread. Duplicate. Frenzy cards. Bite cards. That looks absolutely terrifying. Dismay. Just constantly messing with your mind. Scratch. So some of the art is duplicated, but of course the card changes itself. And Pyromaniac here. So now we're talking about the sanity or the panic card. Sorry. So hallucinations, Pyromaniac, hopelessness, ripping off the bandages, blind escape, destructive outburst. Some really, really cool looking stuff in here. Defeatism, insane courage, sabotage. So awesome. This is so much great additional content added to this game. Field trials, you must have a larva miniature on your character board. So this is the personal equipment. So got field trials, you've got collector, friends until the grave, trophy, bringing the specimen, login, destroying the evidence, scuttle the ship, destination Earth, madness, finders keepers, crafty, madness, lucrative offer, send the signal and escape in an escape pod with an intruder egg. Very cool indeed. So that is the entire deck of these cards. There's one smaller pack to go, as well as a couple mini cards. A couple additional cards in separate packs. We have the Pick Medic card. This is the character draft card. So that matches the other ones for the different characters that you could potentially be. Got a quest item here, the surgery kit for the medic. And on the opposite side, we have that surgery kit. We've got the combat drugs. Flipping that over, combat drugs. And lastly here, we have the starting item for the medic. That is a needle gun. And this last pack of cards was all specific to the medic. So my guess is that there might be some replacement cards here, because here's the medic. This is the medic's trait card, and we didn't see the medic when we were going through the other ones. You'll notice there is a character draft card here, and we just saw a character draft for the medic. So maybe there is an edit, at least in terms of how it looks. Maybe there's not, but there's 2 of them there. So there's got to be a reason for that. And then we've got all the action cards for the medic. So the medic has search, another search card, rest, demolition, interruption, repairs, computer skills, pharmacist, field dressing, and ER. Next up, as a surprise during this unboxing, we're going to be taking a look at the Nemesis Kings box and the Nemesis Space Cats box. These were two add-ons outside of the all-in pledge for Nemesis. These particular items are just for miniatures only and really just allow you to swap miniatures in and out as you see fit. So for instance, here we have the Kings. Obviously in Nemesis, it's focused on the Queens. So what you're going to get in this box are a king for each of the 3 different types of aliens you can go up against, including the ones from the Kickstarter. So that's pretty cool, and you'll see these up close and personal in a second. But again, no extra cards, no extra gameplay elements added in, just miniatures. And then the same thing for the Space Cats. These really give you 4 unique sculpts for a cat in space that you can basically flip out with the first player marker that was included as an exclusive miniature within the all-in pledge. So just giving you alternate options for that first player token. The first sculpt inside the box is a cat mixed with an Xenomorph. So quite the interesting combination there. So a very, very cool looking miniature. Again, a great replacement for a first player marker, but doesn't have any gameplay elements, but looks pretty awesome. Here is another sculpt for one of the cats. It's got an astronaut suit on him. You can see the detail there in the base, and as well the nice detail all the way along in the tube leading up to the back of his helmet. Really, really fine and nice details there. So if you're looking to paint this thing, you're going to have a lot of fun. Here is another fantastic sculpt inside the box. You can see this one here definitely plays off the Carnivores from what I can tell. Now, again, I don't know if there's a first player marker in this box for each one of the different types of intruders within the game, not just the base game, but the Carnivores, the Void Cedars, all that good stuff. But there is some of that going on here, as this one obviously is for the Carnivores. We saw one for the Xenomorphs earlier. The astronaut cat is more generic, and the next one up, I guess, it looks like it falls more into the Xenomorph side of things, so I don't think there's one specific to the Void Cedars, unless I'm misinterpreting. And here's the final miniature. This is quite the dynamic pose here. We have a cat kind of going over top of a metal beam there, but you can see it's got the Xenomorph kind of style connected to it, but it does have this gigantic tail attached to the cat as well, but a very, very cool looking pose. But I don't think this is specific to the Void Cedars. I was thinking that maybe there was one per each type of intruder or different enemy that you could go up against in Nemesis, but it doesn't appear that there's one specific to the Void Cedars, unless this is it and I'm just misinterpreting. But either way, I'm really, really impressed with all the sculpts and the detail on them. I still absolutely love the bases of these things. Like, even though there's lots of lovely detail on the miniatures themselves, the base detail is super crisp and the lines are perfect. So I think painting wise, you're going to have a field day going ahead and painting these, but you can see they're kind of sun dropped in just a grayscale in this case. There are also some very cool cards which just represent the art behind each of these different cat poses. Again, no gameplay element whatsoever, just nice collectibles. When you go ahead and open up the Nemesis Kings box, you're going to find 1 King Xenomorph, you're going to find 3 Carnimorphs, and you're going to find 1 Void Cedar. Here is an up-close look at the King Xenomorph, a very, very impressive miniature. I'll just go ahead and rotate this around. You can see the detail on the base is fantastic, as well as on the sculpt of the miniature itself. All the recesses and different areas of this thing really make it pop. Of course, the sun drop really adds that extra element to it. It's a beautiful looking miniature and even has a nice size to it, being that it's the king. So this thing is a nice scary switch up from the queen inside the game if you'd like to kind of ramp things up or go up against the king. Again, remember though, there's no additional card changes or gameplay elements. It's strictly just visual, but this is pretty awesome. Now there are 3 of these Carnomorph Kings inside the box, and as you can see here, quite the grotesque individual for sure, but there's no point in pulling all 3 of them out, so I've just grabbed the one to give you a look at the detail on this thing. Again, sun drop to match the rest of them as well. Has a lot of recesses inside this particular sculpt, which looks very, very aggressive, and I really like what I'm seeing here detail-wise. So very similar to the Queen Void Cedar, the King Void Cedar also does not have a base, which I really like. It just makes it very clean that it just sits on its own on the game board, which looks fantastic. You can take a look as we spin this thing around at all the really nice detail on this miniature. And I'll actually show you the underside as well, because it's just as cool looking. Like lots and lots and lots to look at there. Again, this is something you're probably not going to want to have coming after you. It kind of reminds me of a gigantic spider, but in terms of a size of this thing, like, it's sizable. It's pretty big. It's sitting in my hand, like, it's large. It is not small, and it stands up off my hand at quite a decent height. But very, very impressed by this particular miniature. It's, again, sun-dropped to match the rest of them. And that is going to conclude the unboxing for Wave 2 for Nemesis. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this helps you get an idea as to what to expect inside these boxes. I appreciate all the support on the channel, and as always, keep on rolling solo.